Cheers, just having a glass of wine after quite a interesting day. I was just sent a link by Jenny, by Jar, Jar, to a video by Dr. Ramani. Dr. Ramani, who does a lot of videos about narcissism. I've seen her before and I've watched little bits of her videos, not a huge amount. This video is titled The Dark Triad, the Light Triad, and Narcissistic Relationships. I'd never come across the concept of the light triad before. I haven't finished watching the video, but I kind of get the gist of it already, that what the light triad might be. And it sort of moves into areas of altruism. But it was interesting what Dr. Ramani says, that if you're too much into the light, you can end up being easily a victim, because you're believing in the goodness of everyone to such a degree that you can be easily preyed upon, and preyed upon by people with the dark triad being, what is it now, is it psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism? So there's lots of isms. Psychopathy, yeah. I think that's it, narcissism and Machiavellianism. Oh, bloody Machiavellian. I went to a meeting today with representatives of the people that own where I live, where I pay rent. And it was a good meeting. It was very sort of exhausting, really. After I felt quite exhausted, I thought I've got to have a drink or two, a couple of wines, a few wines to come down off it. But I met these two gentlemen there. I didn't know what the meeting would be like, because they've had a lot of problems with the landlord of where I live, a housing association, But these two people were decent guys, I believe, and I'm hoping that things are going to move forward in a better way. It's in relation to harassment that's been going on against me for really since I moved here, literally since the day I moved here, but has increased over that period of time, and with a lot of threats of violence and proxy violence, and the person doing the threatening is in distance, not very far away at all, and I consider them a dangerous person. They're dangerous psychologically, certainly, but I think they're used to the idea of, going back to what Dr. Ramani is talking about, the dark triad. They're used to these ways of being in the world that have worked for them, whether it's bullying as a child, and then they take that on into adulthood. And the level of narcissism involved is extraordinary. There's two elements that Dr. Ramani talked about here. She sort of added, or I think she was talking about another analyst or researcher or professor or something, that she said that what often goes along with the dark triad elements of this I think what used to be called psychopathy is now called antisocial what's it called? Antisocial personality disorder. I think that's what it's called. Machiavellianism and narcissism, and you got the older overt and covert narcissists. So it's quite complicated, isn't it? It's quite complicated. I had this 2-hour meeting today. I think I lost my train of thought there. There's a kind of a threat level that might even include sort of a lethal threat level. there's possibly going on at the moment where I am. That the person who's doing the harassment is connected to people in a family sense that might be willing to have somebody killed or have somebody badly injured, put it that way, and the focus would be on me. So no more videos. I'm laughing about it, but it's something I've reported to the police, and the police are reviewing all this stuff, and I want this individual to be charged with harassment under the legal framework around that. The legislation is the 1997 Protection from Harassment Act. I believe that was originally brought in with regard to stalking, but obviously it's got a wider remit. And there's elements in that in which you can have a basic level of harassment, but then you've got harassment causing fear of violence. Now, being threatened many, many times in this case that I'm in this case called my life, but many occasions, and all kinds of other behaviours that it exceeds the criteria for a charge. A charge is basically two instances or more, but I'm way up in the dozen. I'm in the dozens, over a long period of time. And something happened on Christmas Day. My dearest friend came down to see me from a long way away, and ended up, we were both abused by this individual, and there was an attempt at intimidation in the street as well, but we were in a vehicle. My reaction to that is severe. I've said it's a dangerous thing. I've said you have to walk a very careful line, because I've said unless something's done, something's going to happen here. Something's going to happen here. I'm not using any names in this video. I'm not saying where I live. I'm not going to do that. But obviously, and I want this situation resolved peacefully. And when there's someone that feels they can get away with what they can get away with, and they seem to have done it most of their life, it would seem that way, and sort of terrorise an area or other people, or decide on someone to target. The individual themselves, unless you're of a similar ilk, and you've got a lot of people backing you, you can't hold them to account. You can't individually hold them to account, because they're not interested in being held to account. So it needs leverage. And so what the leverage is here is where they live, in terms of, well, if you're going to carry on doing this, then your tenancy's at risk. And it's the criminal law. So the laws are there, but there's no good the laws being there if they're not applied, or if the police individually are seemingly, thus far, as far as I can see, well, this is my experience, adding extra criteria that need to be met, that they seem to have invented, which are not anywhere in the legislation. So I'm in a complaint process there to challenge their inaction. I'm wondering if these things I said in the meeting today to the representatives of the Housing Association, whether what's happening with the Protection from Harassment Act is that a lot of potential cases could be brought, and there's pressure possibly coming down from the CPS and the court system to say stop bringing these cases. There's just too many. It's going to flood the system. But we go back to the idea that if there's no point in having a law if you can't enforce it, it's meaningless. It might as well not exist. That don't have the law then. But then we're back to, well, then it's kind of the law of the jungle then, or it's the law of the most aggressive, the most violent, the most threatening will thrive, as they do in many cases. It's a bit of a side issue here in which I'll just have a sip of wine, I might seem calm, but I'm not that calm. There's a side issue here about, I was concerned, and I haven't ruled it out, that an individual who's threatening me and potentially threatening me using other, and it's still yet to be seen how far that might be taken, other people, and the other people are part of a network which includes some very serious offenders, violent offenders, up to attempted murder and GBH and this sort of thing, that level, which I believe this person has access to. And a conversation that I overheard, which was in code, that potentially suggested having me shot. It might not be the case. I might have misread it, or it might be to do with something else, but I won't go into it, all the details, but I think the potential's there. And the individual that's doing the threatening is from a background, and a familial background, in which certainly one of their close relatives or a relative has been shot and killed. So that's the milieu, if I can use that word, if I may use that word. That's the milieu in which people take a shotgun to the chest, What was I saying about the Protection from Harassment Act 1997, brought in large part because of a need to address stalking behaviour, which obviously needed to be addressed and still does need to be addressed. And looking at a lot of videos that I do, often there's a great failure, and the large preponderance of victims will be women in terms of stalking cases, not 100% exclusively, but the majority will be women. And where there's a failure from the police, essentially, and the system as a whole, is to join up incidents of stalking and to atomize each incident and not just react to it and see it as a minor incident, but not join up the sequence. So in the phrases in the legislation to do with harassment, which covers stalking behaviour, and harassment behaviour that's not deemed specifically stalking, is the course of conduct. So the criteria for the course of conduct is 2 incidents or more of threat, putting someone in fear of violence, means that you cross that threshold. But I'm wondering whether the CPS and the court system, and I did that video yesterday or whenever it was, the day before, about the court system wanting responses from the public and whomsoever about reviewing it. And one of the issues they say they've got is that they're overwhelmed with cases, and they're trying to decide on this idea of an intermediary court and to restructure offences or how they deal with them. What would be a terrible idea is just to say, well, we're just going to pretend these aren't offences anymore and we're not going to deal with them. They mentioned COVID in quotes, as well as being a factor why there's a backlog of all these things to deal with through the courts. But I'm wondering whether there's this pressure coming top down politically into the police, is to say, if you can avoid sending anything to court to do with harassment, just do it, because we haven't got the space, we ain't got the time or the space, or we can't be bothered. And that's quite possible. There's lots of stuff goes on behind the scenes, and then it filters down and what the individual complainant, well, I'm happy to be thought of as a complainant. I'm not expecting to be asked to be called a victim, albeit I've been referred to victim support and other related organisations. I think everyone should be treated fairly. I'm the complainant, and the other person is what are they called? Well, they're not called the perpetrator. They're called the person complained about. I can't think of the term right now. I don't know what it is, but it should be a neutral term. This feeds back into the Lucy Letby miscarriage of justice, is that they've gone in there with the idea that this is the person who's done it, and they've also treated all those doctors as fellow investigators rather than witnesses. I'm talking about Cheshire Police now. So I'm dotting around all over the shop a bit, but I'm just going to have another glass of wine and another glass of wine, you know. But it's hope this might be an interesting video. I'm doing it on the webcam. I bought this new webcam. It's about 20 quid. And I think a lot of people have dealt with issues, whether it's to do with harassment at work or in neighbourhoods. Even the word neighbour is a trigger for me now. I don't like the word neighbour. I just don't like it. And as for love your neighbour, forget that. No, I mean, I've got one neighbour on the other side who's absolutely great, and I know she values me as a neighbour as well, and we're absolutely fine. And she did convey to me that she was very relieved when I moved here, because obviously the property was empty. I live in this housing association place for the terminally bewildered. But when I moved in here, the gentleman that was here before me was an elderly gentleman. I think he was in his 90s and sadly passed away, and then became available. And I was homeless at the time, and then so this place came up. I'm not just saying all this just to talk about myself, but I think these are issues that I think affect a lot of people. What to do about when you get into the orbit of someone that you can't reason with them. They're focused on you. Going back to what Dr. Ramani's talking about, the dark triad. They're impossible to deal with, and they mean to destabilise your life, and they do it, and they're able to do it. And the great struggle I've been involved in is, for me, in a personal level, is trying to get them to be held accountable under the law and under the tenancy agreement. So these are both essentially contracts. One's like a social contract in terms of that we're meant to abide by the law. And that's why we have these laws. And this law around harassment is very clear. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. But if you're not going to apply it, in situations, even when you've been given evidence, i.e. the police have been given evidence, then you might as well not be there. It might as well not be there. The police are reviewing everything now, but they're only doing that because I've gone through a complaints process. You've got to push everything. You've got to push it. I'm very worried. I'm very worried about what could happen and what my response might be. If the worst combination of things happen, I can just see it. I've watched so many things on videos where it's telling a story about something. What's the word? Not tragic, but there's just something something just so extreme happens. But there's always a backstory. There's always a There's always a story behind it, and it's built up over time, and sometimes an individual, there's been signs for a long time. It's a bit like what Dr. McConville, cheers to Dr. McConville, seems a great guy, you know. He says, and that phrase that I used as a title for one of the videos, that the event starts long before you notice it. So the event that happens in terms of a potential what seems an extraordinary escalation, or just a sudden event of potential violence or defense of oneself, and which ends in a very extreme way, one way or another. It started a long time ago. Things don't come out of nowhere. I think it's the, you know, I read that thing, the Tao Te Ching, or the Tao Te Ching, I don't know how you pronounce it, or Lao Tzu, isn't it? The idea of just try to stop things when they're small, don't let things get big. Try to deal with problems when they're small. Well, when you're dealing with people with the dark triad, or whether narcissism or psychopathy, they're not available to you wanting to deal with a problem when it's small, because they've made their mind up. They're not reachable. They're not playing on the. It's like playing chess with a pigeon thing. Nothing against pigeons, but they're not playing the same game. They're not in the same rules. They don't have the same rules. And if they're connected to a network, I'm not saying everybody that they know, but there's certainly a network of people that equally are not playing the same rules. And I'm aware of some of them where I live. I'm aware of the potential of a kind of there's things have been discussed, and people are aware that I'm a problem for someone they know or they're related to, you know. And what do you do about that, you know? And the conversation I overheard may be related to someone else, but if I won't say what it was, but it leads me to believe that the offer's out there. The offer's out there to do something on behalf of this threatening individual, to sort of back them up. This has been a real extraordinary time. But meeting these two chaps today, they were former police officers. I'm not giving any names away. I think it's all right for me to talk about this. They seem to be reasonable listeners, and it sort of, I felt very emotional at the end of this 2-hour interaction we had. I felt they were listening to me for the first time. I felt listened to from in a formal sense, from the housing aspect of it. And obviously it's their full-time job. I'd been dealing with other people within the organisation who had literally lied about what had been happening, and so I felt some measure of hope today, and we talked about it in the meeting, about it's a rebuilding of trust. But trust is built on actions, you know, actions that you can verify, that somebody does what they say they will do, or they'll take you seriously when they say they'll take you seriously, and that it means something. I don't want any illegitimate actions to be taken, obviously. It's got to be out of the soul and the heart of order. Things like contracts should also replicate that, represent that. The laws should also represent that. They should be sane. They should be sane. And in the case of Lucy Letby, yes, there are obviously laws against deliberate harm. But you've got a situation there in which there's a complete fabrication that deliberate harm has taken place. there's a lot that needs to be dealt with there. I think I did an email last night to that criminal legal system. What do they call it? I don't know, I forgot what it's called now. The criminal justice system. Oh God, that's why I couldn't remember, because I keep forgetting it's meant to be about justice. I know it's meant to be about justice, but that system is failing a lot in that regard, on both sides of the fence. It's failing in regard of going after innocent people and ensuring they stay as long in prison as they can possibly make them, and not then addressing what failed in that system at all, not addressing it, just letting it happen. I've forgotten his name now, that kind of judge of the past. He's gone now. I mean, he's passed away. I've forgotten his name. I've quoted him many times, but his attitude of don't involve yourself in this, and sometimes it's better to have innocent people in prison rather than bring the notion of the police and the criminal justice system in doubt, to put it in doubt, so that it loses the trust of the people. That's such a twisted and indeed, and I've said this before, a psychopathic way of thinking, and absolutely, sorry, I'm all twisted, bitter and twisted. It's such an immoral way of thinking, and that person was one of the sort of highest judges in the land, or one of the most experienced judges, and that's where they're coming from. And that's at the root of a lot of this, that systems the systems that are there, ostensibly they're there and they're being paid for a purpose, to protect order, to maintain it, to decide when things have been done wrong by individuals or corporations. And yet often their primary focus is on themselves, to protect themselves as a system. That also comes into play with regard to the NHS and Lucy Letby, is that there's a cohesion here, there's a collecting together of different institutions in that case that all wish to protect themselves: the police, the NHS, criminal justice system as a whole, that would wish this all to just stop, just to go away. I know I've moved into the reason why people feel so. I get trolls. Everyone's getting trolls now and again, or whatever. Some people might think I'm a troll in certain circumstances, but the trolls would say things like, on the videos I've done about, you're obsessed. Why are you obsessed? Well, yeah, I am obsessed. I'm obsessed with the idea that we need a sane world that we're living in, and there has to be justice, and there has to be truth, there has to be order and fairness. But when it's absent, you become obsessed about it. When you're in a peaceful state and no one's bothering you, then you're not obsessed about anything in particular, unless you've got other obsessions, and they could be enjoyable obsessions, things you love or whatever. When you're being threatened, when you believe you might be attacked on any given day because somebody's saying they're going to attack you, or that someone else is going to attack you, then you become obsessed about that, or you can become highly focused and hyper vigilant about it. It's natural, isn't it? At the root of a lot of this, I just watched Tea Break with Tasha's video about missing children, and the idea of the difference between a review and an inquiry, and that the sense is, they want to keep covering up problems, they want to keep covering up crimes and not wanting to be accountable. I suppose at the root of a lot of this is the players in the political world. They're just however it's come to this, they've just got short-term thinking, and they're just thinking about, well, we mustn't say or do anything which will upset the apple cart in the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years. So they're not operating, hardly ever operating out of principle, but they're operating because of expediency and back to the self-service again. The service of their own career, the service of the party, the service of them when they're in government. Obviously someone like Starmer exemplifies that. It's whatever works for them. And they're not really there as public servants. They're not really there as public servants. I don't want to be unfair to any individual, and it is easy to give collective blame, start saying it's judges, it's barristers, it's the police, you can do that so easily, and you can then end up by making a categorical error, in a sense of categorizing individual failures or individual corruption and just saying everyone's guilty of it all the time, and then that's unfair because it isn't the case. I do think, however, that organisations are, in this country as we stand at the moment, and certainly in other countries as well, but in this country they're systemically corrupt and systemically not willing to be accountable, and they need more and more and more of us. And this comes into Amanda Gazide's video that she put up the other day about challenging local politics and the lack of accountability. This is to do with the Glastonbury issue there, and UNESCO and the local council and the Green Party wanting to kind of make it a fait accompli that Glastonbury has World Heritage status, and with all the effects of that, the deleterious effects of that, they're going to harm what Glastonbury is, or what Avalon is. Thinking of it as in its spiritual sense, what Avalon is. I know I'm dotting around, but it's an extraordinary time. These things are all coming together for us as individuals, and potentially as people meeting and learning about each other through watching videos or reading comments that people make. There's a spirit rising. There's a kind of spirit rising in people across the world, I believe, that we need to. We can't live in a fake world. We can't live being told, and we can't live a series of lies. Is it Solzhenitsyn? I think that's how you pronounce it. That Russian geezer. He's got some kind of quote where he says, "Well, if the lie comes into the world, if the lie, whatever the lie happens to be, could be about anything, at least let it not come through me." That's a sort of vague recollection of the quote. At least do not let the lie come through me into the world. I don't want to embody it. I don't want to be a vehicle for it or a conduit for the lie, whatever the lie is. And there's a growing spirit that is in opposition to that now in many, many individuals, and you'll see them writing, they'll be doing videos, they'll be doing songs, they'll be doing whatever they're doing, making films. I don't know, it could be anything. And they're in opposition to the lie, or the lies, or the panoply of lies, the whole fabric of lies that we're being told, and that the organisations and institutions are now corrupted by this fabric of lies, or the fabric of the institutions is corrupted by lies, I should say. So it's undermined. It's I don't know, I shouldn't think of it in too complicated language. It's not complicated, it's just, and we're dealing with, when we were in smaller groups, and maybe there was like a longhouse or whatever there is, like the village meeting house, and there were leaders and stuff like that, you were closer to the operators of power and who makes decisions of how what good order should be. We were closer to it, and I'm not saying it was perfect, but we were closer to it. But here it's very, very distant from the individual, and decisions are made in locked rooms. But deception is a big part of this. It's deception. It's not even so much that the decisions aren't being made by us. It's that they're being made, but we're being told that other decisions have been made, but real decisions are behind the curtain. The curtain in The Wizard of Oz. You're not seeing behind the curtain there. That's the problem. And back to that quote, I forgot her name now, that German writer, where she says, we must not live under the rule of lies. We can't, because if you live under the rule of lies, then your spirit's completely undermined. And who's that Russian guy that does these videos from the 80s and 90s? He kind of defected. He used to work for the KGB. He's got a Russian-sounding name. You'll know this if you looked into him. He talks about these different stages of how you undermine a country and everything. But one of the stages is demoralization. And on an individual level, if we feel nothing we say or do can affect a situation that we think is intolerable, either on our own behalf or on behalf of others, that nothing we do can affect it, nothing we say can affect it, individually or even collectively, then we're demoralized. So we've got to resist falling into that demoralized state. And we are resisting it. The people that say, and for whatever reason they say it, with regard to Lucy Letby, the jury's found her guilty and that's it. That stopping of thought, that deliberate ending of thought, whatever it is about those individual psychologies, the psychology of those individual people, I should say, whatever it is, that can't be the zeitgeist. That can't be what rules us. That can't be the culture, because that's death. Actually, that's the death of thought, the death of spirit, the death of morality, the death of truth, because it has no care, it has no heart in it at all, and it doesn't wish to engage with heartfelt concerns and genuine concerns when someone has been actually tortured by state institutions, and that torture beginning in a much smaller way, back to the ideas trying to stop things when they're small, the Lao Tzu thing. It began with a group of co-workers building up this persecutory engine that then gets attached to these power organisations called the police, called the CPS, called the criminal justice system, and so forth, and ends with the destruction of a life. I shouldn't say destruction of a life, because Lucy Letby is here. She is going to be freed, and she's going to go back to her family. It's got to be soon. They are stealing her life day by day. Back to my individual problem, and I put this to my friend in a conversation, and I think it struck her, my friend, my dearest friend, that in a way that I was just putting it in terms of theft. So what's happening to Lucy Letby is a theft of her life. It's a theft of her freedom. It's an act of theft. It's much more than that as well. It's an absolute. It's a form of it's torture, but it's rooted in the theft of her good name as well. In Arthur Miller's The Crucible, his play The Crucible, John Proctor has an amazing speech towards the end, and in which he doesn't want to sign his name to that he agrees that he's either dobbed somebody in to say that they're a witch to save his life or something, or that he is one himself. He said, well, just do it, just kill me or whatever, but don't steal my name, don't take my name. I'll have to read it again, because it's brilliant what Arthur Miller does in that. I think he has this cri de coeur, this cry from the heart, which says, leave me my name, do whatever you want to my body, but leave me my name. And what they've done, they've incarcerated an innocent person's body, Lucy Letby's body, and her physicality, but they've attacked her name to the point that it's become a worldwide name that other people means a certain thing. So they've murdered her name, but her name will be rejuvenated. And it's about Lucy Letby, but it's about anyone and everyone that happens to, when there are many cases, and as one of the gentlemen who comments, all the people who are caught up in the injustice around the prosecutions around the post office scandal, the scandal of injustice there, the murdering of people's good name, or the attacking of them, the besmirching of them, and it's on a continuum, of severity. But there is a change. There is a change that will happen and can happen and must happen, and we're going to see it. And Lucy Letby's The Trials. Somebody's got a YouTube called, I think it's called The Trials of Lucy Letby, and it's a very apposite choice of title for the channel, because they're putting her through trials in the literal sense, but trials in the figurative sense. But that power, when it's founded on lies, I don't think they're mistakes at this stage. I think they're founded on deep corruption and very, very disturbed and disordered individuals, such as Evans, for example, and very, very disturbed and disordered organisations, such as the Cheshire Police in this example. And that's not to say every officer, of course it's not. I don't want to unfairly castigate an officer that's trying to do their best, and they happen to be employed by the Cheshire Police. But that hummingbird operation, headed up by that, that person's happy to take an award for what he's done. He may believe he's done a great job still, but I really doubt, and I wonder what other people think, I really doubt whether everyone involved, I suspect, I should say, that everyone involved in this attack on an innocent person, that's what it has been from beginning to end. It's an attack, it's an assault and a kidnapping. and a destruction of their name. Everyone is thinking, what the hell am I part of? What have I done? And they've got to cleave. They've got to cleave unto and believe in that it's right what they've done, because if they faced the truth of what they've done, they could not live with themselves. And they know that the exposure of what they've done will have enormous ramifications to them individually, as it should. I'll leave it there. I didn't know what the course of this video would be, but I think I'll put it up and just put it out there. Nothing to lose. I've not said anything I don't believe. I've not said anything that's untrue. And it's my viewpoint, and this is what I look at other people's videos. I look at their viewpoints. I don't have to like them. Some of them I despise. But they've got the right to put them out there. I'm not saying nobody should not say what they're saying, but this is a conversation, essentially, many directional conversation that's being had in all sorts of ways, not just through podcasts, through videos, through articles, in the comments section. These are conversations. This is what it is. This is just a way of people. Essentially, we're meeting each other. We're meeting each other in spirit. We're meeting each other in what matters to us. I'll leave it there. Thank you. Take care.